All right, welcome back to another episode of the Mandalorian Season 2 episode reviews. Now, due to unforeseen circumstances, we've decided to consolidate the last three episodes into one podcast. So, with that out of the way, I'm your host, Captain Henson, and with me today.
Yeah, this is CJ Rawl. First time on my first episode of State of Star Wars.
And Django Fett, aka the Macho Mandalorian. I've also done a review for one of the episodes for the Mandalorian, so it's good to do for the rest of the episodes.
All right, so first up is gonna be episode 6, chapter 14, The Tragedy.
Okay, so this is written by Jon Favreau and directed by Robert Rodriguez. And in this episode, the Mandalorian takes Baby Yoda, or Grogu, to the ancient temple on Tython. And Tython is not a frozen world, it's actually looks like a forest planet, and places him on the Seeing Stone at the center. As Grogu meditates, there is a protective force field around him, and the Mandalorian can't get to him at all. So at that point, he knows he can't really get him. But there is another ship that comes in, and it's Slave One. I recognize that ship instantly. And Boba Fett arrives with the mercenary Fennec Shand, who the Mandalorian had previously left for dead on Tatooine. And Boba explains that the armor worn by Cobb Vanth belongs to him, as his father was Jango Fett. The Mando's pretty hesitant about the whole thing and doesn't believe him, but eventually just agrees to return the armor in exchange for the safety of Grogu. And just as they're having their agreements, Moff Gideon arrives and deploys stormtroopers, in which all of them pretty much fight the stormtroopers in their own ways. During which time Grogu finishes meditating and the energy field dissipates around him, and Gideon destroys the Mando ship from orbit before deploying his Dark Troopers, which we finally see for the in action, and succeed in capturing Grogu. So they capture Grogu and then they flee in almost like this Iron Man S style. So they pretty much repel all the stormtroopers, and as pretty much the end, they honor their deal, and Fett and Fennec promise to help the Mando to get Grogu back. And for this and then the rest of the episodes, they travel in Fett's ship Slave One to Navarro and ask for Dunn's help, Cara Dune's help, in breaking criminal Migs Mayfield, who was Bill Burr's character from season 1, out of a New Republic prison because he knows the location of this specific ship that they're tracking. And that's the episode.
All right, so overall, I thought this was a really good episode. Getting to see Tython, different than it was in the EU, but still nice. Getting some really nice action, especially from Boba Fett. Of course, Tamora Morrison's a badass in his own right, so getting to see that. And, well, I mean, we finally get to see the Dark Troopers in action, and whoa, they look amazing in this. Pretty much getting their designs ripped straight from Dark Forces. I don't remember if it was in this episode or a later episode where they reference the fact that these are Generation 3 Dark Troopers. I think it's the next episode, but besides the point. The highlight of the episode for me was finally getting concrete evidence that within the new canon, Django and Boba are Mandalorian. Because
Yep.
for years now, people have been citing Almec And the words of Dave Filoni, the words of George Lucas, according to Dave Filoni, that Jango Fett wasn't a Mandalorian. But we never had, like, and the idea has been that they weren't actually Mandalorian, but now we actually have evidence, which is a godsend. And plus, I think them being Mandalorian is so vital to their characters that making them not Mandalorian does more to harm their characters rather than add.
So my thoughts with this episode is that I really rather enjoyed this episode, especially after multiple watchings. And I gotta say, probably one of the biggest highlights for me in this episode is probably seeing Boba Fett in live action actually being what he was in the expanded universe. Just seeing that in live action for the first, just seeing that in live action is exactly what I wanted to see in Boba Fett, with Boba Fett in live action, was him being what he was in the expanded universe, and that was the badass that we all knew and loved. And honestly, a lot of things I didn't see at all coming. Hell, I didn't expect Boba to appear in this episode at all whatsoever. Hell, I didn't even expect what happened to Baby Yoda or Grogu to get captured in this episode. And that was like a that was a big kind of a big game changer right there, especially even with the Razor Crest getting destroyed. That's was another big surprise for me in this episode. And overall, despite what some people would say, I think this episode was absolutely like amazing. And the payoff was really well done.
Yeah, so I'm going to be a little biased on this episode because I think it's probably like my favorite of this season so far. Um, and I mentioned that it's directed by Robert Rodriguez because I wasn't actually a big fan of Robert Rodriguez before with his films. There's a couple I liked, but I just didn't know going in. But I felt like after watching this episode, I felt like he really understood Boba Fett as a character quite a bit. And it was just a hell of an entrance when Boba Fett appears. Even without his armor, he's so precise and savage when it comes to killing his enemies. And as soon as he dons his armor, he is just an unstoppable badass. And, he was just mowing down these stormtroopers easily. And then when they try to flee after seeing this guy in action, he just shoots a rocket and easily it just stole the whole thing from me. And as a Boba Fett fan, a Jango Fett fan, they just nailed it perfectly with Tamora Morrison playing the role. And I've waited very, very patiently because up to this point, I wasn't really buying into the season, and I was kind of waiting patiently for Boba Fett. And we finally see him in this episode, and he just didn't disappoint whatsoever. And having the Dark Troopers come in, and I've just been reading Dark Forces recently and love that series. Just seeing the Dark Troopers come in is just. I think it is different in this universe, which is fine. But they nailed the look, and this is more of not just the humans. These Dark Troopers, they're actually just like purely robotic, and they actually confirmed this later on. But overall, I love this episode, and probably my favorite episode of the bunch.
All right, so next up, episode 7, chapter 15, The Believer.
Okay, so the plot of this episode is prisoner Mix Mayfield is working on the Carthan chop fields and is remanded into the custody of Marshal Cara Dune. The Mandalorian needs Mayfield, a former Imperial soldier, in order to acquire the coordinates to Moff Gideon's ship. Mayfield directs them to a hidden Imperial radonium refinery on Morak. As all the others are known to Imperial security, the Mandalorian must accompany Mayfield into the refinery to access a terminal and steal the coordinates. Mayfield and the Mandalorian hijack one of the transports and disguise themselves as soldiers. The highly explosive radonium shipments are attacked by pirates. The Mandalorian, Din Djarin, is almost overwhelmed as two TIE fighters swoop in and they reach the facility, the only shipment to survive. The terminal Mayfield needs is in the officers' mess hall. But Mayfield sees his former commanding officer, Valen Hess, and fears being recognized. The Mandalorian goes instead, but the terminal requires a face scan, forcing him to remove his helmet to acquire the codes. He is confronted by Hess, but Mayfield intervenes. After a tense drink where Hess callously dismisses the Imperial soldiers and civilians who died in Operation Cinder, an angered Mayfield shoots Hess dead. Mayfield and the Mandalorian fight their way to the roof, while Fennec Shand and Dune provide covering fire, and Boba Fett arrives aboard Slave One. Mayfield destroys the refinery with a well-placed sniper shot. The ship is pursued by two TIE fighters, but Fett obliterates them using a seismic charge. Dune lets Mayfield go free, and as thanks for his aid, and the Mandalorian Din Djarin sends Moff Gideon a threatening message vowing to rescue Grogu.
Alright, so this episode was certainly a surprise. Going into it, I was hoping that the rescue of Mayfield would have been like the first 5 to 10 minutes of the episode. And of course, we see that wasn't going to be the case. And honestly, when all is said and done, I am not disappointed. I actually really like this episode. From episode 6 from last season, Mayfield was pretty much just Bill Burr. If you're familiar with him, his comedy, he was essentially just playing himself, and some people may have found that distracting, but I enjoyed it. Here, though, he surprised me. Like, I know Bill Burr can act, but he had a ton of range in this episode. The scene between him, Din, and his former Imperial officer was one of the greatest interactions I think we've ever gotten in Star Wars. And we get a nice reference to Operation Cinder there. And overall, yeah, this episode was a surprise, and I hope we get to see Mayfield show up again, which I'm sure he is, given how the episode ends.
Yeah, this episode was actually really enjoyable. It wasn't really like on par with like the last episode, but I will say that this episode was actually a surprisingly enjoyable episode. It kind of was an episode 4 for me because with episode 4, it was kind of like that episode where I thought it was going to be like one of those filler episode, like kind of like an episode 2 where it was just a filler episode or something like that. But it actually turned out to be kind of an enjoyable adventure in a sense, and that's what this episode was. And I gotta say, it really developed on a character that I didn't too much care much about, and never really thought we'd ever see that kind of a development in such a character. And I gotta say, Mayfield really did steal the show with this episode. Being kind of showing more of that of his imperial backstory, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so I really liked this episode too. It was a pretty good episode. At this before this point, I think Mayfield for me was kind of a one-dimensional villain, but I felt like with this episode in particular, when he encounters this his former Imperial commanding officer, he's talking about Operation Cinder like he knows about it quite a bit, and it humanized him in a way that I didn't expect, where he regrets his actions, and this guy is the officer he's talking to doesn't regret a single thing. He buys into the propaganda no matter what. But he has changed completely and taken a complete 180 in a great way. And he shoots him down, and that's something that I would, if I was in his shoes, I would do the same thing. And even though, alert the whole base in the process, the way this guy is talking, of course, I do the same thing. So I don't blame him, and see him at the end actually like, hey, give me that rifle before they leave the base, and he actually just shoots it and destroys the entire base in the process, just to cut all his bases and stuff, cover his bases, because he doesn't want this to repeat again, this Operation Cinder or so, or whatever they're thinking of doing on this Imperial base. You can tell he regrets everything, and it's likely that we'll see him. I don't think it's going to be in The Mandalorian, but probably in Rangers of the New Republic, I think there's a possibility that he could be featured in an episode in there. That's what I'm thinking, but I could be wrong. It could be a Mandalorian, but yeah, it would be great to see him again for sure.
Alright, so, lastly, Episode 8, Chapter 16, The Rescue. So, Din and Dune board an Imperial shuttle and capture Dr. Pershing, Doctor from the first season. They enlist help of Bo-Katan and her group of Mandos. We get a really nice interaction between Boba and her group. Basically, Bo will get Gideon's cruiser and the Darksaber, and Din will consider helping them liberate Mandalore. They use the shuttle to get close enough to crash land on Gideon's cruiser, with Fett pretending to attack them when Slave 1. Bo-Katan, Casca, Fennec, and Dune fight through stormtroopers to the cruiser's bridge. Meanwhile, Din finds all the dark troopers, has a fight, and just barely beats it, using his Beskar spear, and then he ejects the rest into space. He fights Gideon after finding Grogu. They have a fight. Gideon uses his Darksaber, Din uses his Beskar spear, and is able to defeat Gideon, thus giving him ownership of the Darksaber. Everyone is now on the bridge. Lo and behold, the Dark Troopers can fly. They get back on the ship and are heading toward the bridge. Things are looking grim until an X-Wing lands in the ship. A hooded figure wielding a green lightsaber, annihilates the Dark Troopers, and surprise, surprise, it is Luke Skywalker, answering the call that Grogu gave 2 episodes ago. So, after a back and forth, Mando has to say goodbye to Grogu. And it's already been established that Din acknowledges the fact that Grogu needs to be with his own kind. He needs to be trained, and, Din can't really do that. He takes off his helmet so Grogu can finally see him. Luke takes him to probably the Jedi Temple we saw in Episode 8. But before we got that, we had this little tidbit. Din can give the Darksaber to Bo, or at the very least, she won't accept it. According to Gideon, since Din now owns it, they have to fight, and she has to win the ownership of the Darksaber. That plot will be the major focus of next season. But it isn't over, because we got an end credits scene. We see Jabba's palace, mostly deserted. We get Bib Fortuna as Fat. Fett and Fennec go there. He kills Bib Fortuna and claims the throne, setting up the book of Boba Fett. See what that's about later. So, this was a really good finale, not just to this season, but the multi-season arc that we had going since season 1. Grogu leaves the show. He'll most likely come back later, but I'm happy that he's gone. I've been wanting him to leave for a while, by the end of the season, because what this series became with the introduction of Grogu, it took the focus away from Din Djarin. Grogu was the driving force of the plot. Mando himself didn't really have much agency, and I wanted the series to focus more so on The Mandalorian, what Mandalore is up to, and seeing the seedy underbelly of the galaxy. Not focus on yet another Force user, because as much as I love the Force, I want the non-Force users to get some love too. Also, Luke Skywalker was a surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one. I've heard it said that him and many of the other characters we got this season were only there for the fan service, and while that certainly most likely played a part, I think it should be noted that Luke Skywalker, in terms of the active Jedi that are around that we know of, it makes the most sense for us to see him. And it also serves the purpose of allowing or giving us the chance to actually see Luke Skywalker before he gets his character arc in the sequel trilogy. We get to see Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master in his prime. And I'm sure he'll be a major focus in this era that they've established. But at least we got this. And hey, seeing Bib Fortuna again, and also played by Matthew Wood like he was in episode 1, was a treat. Sucks that he died, but hey, it was nice to see him again.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this episode, for like the conclusion of season 2 and for the conclusion of a 2-season arc of Din Djarin and Grogu, I think this was a really great conclusion personally. And for like the appearance of Luke Skywalker, I would agree that it definitely does make a lot of sense for him to happen. I mean, of all the choices I would have all like gone with, like say someone like, aside from Luke Skywalker, like say like characters like Cal Kestis, or even something as doubtful and impossible like Ezra Bridger. I'd say Luke was the one that made the most absolute sense to actually like appear, because he's one of the few actual Jedis that's still around that we know of. It was what it was. Yeah, as for like that little bit at the end, bit at the end with the build up for the book of Boba Fett, I gotta say that was a big surprise, and they really executed that really well to like give to us like another series for us to look forward to, aside from what they already shown us.
So for me, I thought this was a good season finale. I think the first half was a little boring to me. I think not so much boring, but it was just like the action in itself was kind of a little haphazard for me. They were just plowing through guys, no problem. I really felt like I wanted to see more Boba Fett in the action, but unfortunately he was in the ship at the time. I felt like up to the point where Luke appears, and that's awesome. He just remarkable just to see him come back again, and almost just exactly like the Rogue One scene with Darth Vader. It's pretty much the same. Unfortunately, somebody spoiled the Luke Skywalker thing on social media for me. So when I saw this scene, I was like, okay, Luke Skywalker is here, and I expected it there. So when I watched it, so unfortunately that happened for me. But other than that, I really I enjoyed this episode. There is this thing where Boba Fett and I think what's her name, Casca. For some reason, the other person wasn't there too, which was kind of weird.
Yeah.
I didn't get that, but yeah, they were fighting, and she was saying something about like, oh, you're like kind of like a second rate, like a sidekick to him, to Mando or something like that. I don't know about that. I think that's kind of stupid to say that, but it was like not only that, but then they were like, oh, we're true Mandalorians and you're not even Mandalorian. It's just like, if you read into Mandalorian culture, it's never been about that. It's about adopting other people and their cultures and races and alien people into the mix. And once they conquer them, they wouldn't just obliterate them, of course. They would just integrate them into their culture. Some of the first Mandalorians weren't even human, so there's that.
No, that's right.
I mean, I think it's just kind of stupid them bickering, but it kind of like plays to like how it is in real life, almost like, oh, you're not a real insert American or something, in real world politics.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, kind of like this racist mentality or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of how I see it. Luke Skywalker parts are awesome, and I think like his face was kind of. I mean, it's definitely better than Leia in Rogue One. I will give you that. But you can still see like it's pretty obvious, and the voice was, you can definitely hear it's not exactly like Luke.
Yeah.
But it's getting better, and of course the end credit scene where usually, well, with the end credits we usually get a flashy end credits where it's a
We
flashy
get a look at the concept art.
concept art. Yeah. So we get a look at the concept art usually, and then the episode ends. And I usually always love looking at the concept art.
Me too.
So in this they don't even show any concept art. So I was like, okay, there might be something more. So you waited until after that, and then you see this little thing with Boba Fett and Fennec, and he comes in almost exactly like how Luke comes into in Return of the Jedi. with Jabba the Hutt into Jabba Hutt's palace. So Boba Fett comes in the same style and kills for Bib Fortuna, and it's going to be interesting to see how he comes into play. Will he be like this underworld boss, or and that's all he'll be, or will he just kind of like go to his Mandalorian roots and stick with or go to that? It's going to be interesting to see how he evolves as a character, Boba Fett for sure.
Yeah.
And I like this episode.
I will say this in regards to the interaction between Fett and
Casca.
Casca. The thing is, Bo-Katan and her followers, let's not forget, these are the same people who in TCW, Maul killed Vizsla and assumed control of Mandalore. She was firmly against that. Because in her mind, well, the only one who's worthy to rule Mandalore is a true-blooded Mandalorian. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I also loved the bit of her saying to Boba, "You're not a Mandalorian." He simply says, "Never said I was." We get this it's an interesting idea where while being a Mandalorian is important, he doesn't care what other people think. Which I think is a perfect balance between him actually being Mandalorian and him not. He is, but he just doesn't care.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's going to be interesting. And this will just move into what we hope and what we think will happen in the future. Because it seems to me, and I've had a few conversations with my friends, that Din Djarin at some point may be the one rule Mandalore. And as I said, Bo-Katan is the type of person, and we've seen it before, that believes the only one worthy to rule Mandalore is someone born on Mandalore. A true Mandalorian, if you will. Or a pure-blooded, I guess. And as we saw with Boba Fett, she doesn't look too fondly on foundlings. And now that Din has the Darksaber, it's going to be interesting. Because the two of them have totally different viewpoints of what makes a Mandalorian. Din is set in the old way, while Bo and her group are, I wouldn't even know what to call it, a different sect of Mandalorian culture. I do think that Bo-Katan will become Mandalore, and at some point, Din, through whatever circumstances, will become the new Mandalore, and he'll be the one to truly unite Mandalore. And he's going to be the one to set things straight. Probably hit a good balance between the old and new ways.
Yeah, would be a good idea.
Alright, what do you two think? Or what do you want to happen?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not really quite too sure. It's really up in the air, but probably exactly what you just said, Hanson. I definitely would want something like that. Hell, even like probably like a little struggle with Din Djarin wanting to be like to actually wanting to like maybe be Mandalore and stuff, because we can tell like he really didn't want to like be the wielder of the Darksaber. He was very insistent of wanting to give it back to Bo, because all he really cared about was his foundling son, and that was it. He didn't want like the ownership of the Darksaber at all. So it'll be interesting to see something like that in season 3.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, like I agree with everything you guys are saying too. It's just Mando is at his most vulnerable now because of giving Baby Yoda to Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to deal with all this Darksaber stuff. He didn't even know about wielding the Darksaber and stuff too. So I think he's going to lose really badly against Bo-Katan, and Bo-Katan will be the wielder. And he's going to struggle throughout this the rest of the season. And I think he will eventually go to Mandalore at some point and see like the chaos that Bo-Katan is doing, and she's kind of like a really bad dictator and just abusing her power and destroying the people there, that eventually he'll come into play in the end and defeat her in battle. And I think Bo-Katan will probably cheat or something, and then he'll probably kill her in some way and take the Mandalore role. this is kind of like our predictions. This is not going to happen, but we don't know if this is going to happen or not. But I would like to see that happening. I think that would be really awesome. And we could talk about the other stuff maybe a little bit later, the TV shows.
Yeah, that's a good question or questions for another time.
Mhm.
So, to start wrapping things up, what are our overall thoughts for the season? Overall, I really liked the season. It didn't have the wow factor of season 1, but I think this season did a much better job at developing the story at a more. It just did a better job at developing the story at a good pace. And it did a really good job at connecting itself to the greater canon, which, in my opinion, has been an issue within the new canon. And it seems that Lucasfilm is finally fixing that.
Yeah.
We got connections to, other eras and also setting things up. Did some of it feel like fan service? Yes. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. What we got in terms of, getting Ahsoka, Cobb Vanth, Boba Fett, they were used, I think, really effectively to not only develop the current Mando story, but like I said, also have or give a meaningful connection to the larger universe. So, in that respect, I like what we got, and I'm a little biased because I've been wanting Grogu to leave the show for a while, and now that I know he's gone, I am really excited for season 3.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of that. Honestly, my personal thoughts with this season, like I would pretty much say like this was like a really great season. I would admit it does definitely have its flaws. I mean, nothing's perfect, but I gotta say this season overall was really kind of like a good season. Like a great season. And a slight improvement from the first season, despite this first season also having its moments as well. And yeah, I'd have to agree. Like but yeah, it's nice to see like familiar faces and exactly what you just said, Henson. This wasn't necessarily like that bad of fan service. It's not like that they completely force this down onto us like hey, remember this character, remember that character, remember Boba Fett. And it's like, no, it never felt like that at all. It's like maybe at first glance, sure, you'd think that, but it's really not that. Those appearances of these characters were necessary for the ongoing story of this season. And personally, I was okay with that. And as for Grogu leaving the series, I would have to say, while I do like him and I think that he's adorable and stuff, and he did steal a show during his little moments, but I have to admit, I am glad that he's left the show. It gives us the development of what we need to have, and that's development of our main character, Din Djarin. And of course, the biggest thing with this show is that it's called The Mandalorian, not the Baby Yoda show. I know that's a little fun nickname that a lot of us have, that a lot of people have for this show, for The Mandalorian. But however, this show is really centered around just Mandalorians and not Force users. So that's my basic thoughts of this season entirely, and I look forward to the next.
All right, so I thought it was a good season overall. I don't think it's as good as season 1. I mean, that was kind of like the first inception of
Yeah.
Mandalorian, and introduced us to everything.
Hmm.
But season 2 was still very good. A lot of great action. Um, Introduction of new characters like Boba Fett, which was amazing. That was just meant for me. Even bringing back season 1 characters into like a couple episodes, I think is awesome because that's kind of like your bread and butter, and that's how you made season 1 so successful. Is you introduce these new characters where there's interesting backstories and developed developed them in a way that you just loved them and really cared for them, and you wanted to see them again. And thankfully, we did in season 2. Um, and I felt like there was a couple episodes that I didn't really like and was not a big fan of.
Yeah.
And even Grogu got on my nerves in the beginning, but later on, towards the end, I was like, okay, it's going to be sad to see him go, but in the end, I mean, this was not meant for Grogu. It's meant for a Mandalorian, with Din Djarin. So I want to see more of him and develop more of him and his character, and not just Baby Yoda in general, and just focus on him and his plot of just saving him or whatever it is. So I think now you can have more freedom to develop him and not focus on Baby Yoda. Hopefully, they don't go back to Baby Yoda again with constantly. Um, I don't have a problem with him, but it's just that
Yeah.
over time it just got a little bit too much. But
Hmm.
overall, really like the season, and I cannot wait for season 3. It's going to be just epic.
All right, so that wraps things up. If you're interested in hearing more of our thoughts, along with the thoughts of our acquaintances about topics on the EU and new canon, you can check out the other videos on our State of Star Wars YouTube channel. And shameless plug, I have my own YouTube channel where I not only talk about Star Wars, but other franchises I like.
Yeah, pretty much what Henson said. Check out the other videos on State of Star Wars, and check do feel free to also check out our channels as well. I know this is, as you said, a shameless little plug-in, but feel free to check us out. For me, I'm starting up I'm gonna start up doing let's plays for my channel and stuff. So I'm gonna be playing like whatever games that I have and stuff. So look forward to that for my channel, and also a trailer for that, which I'm currently working on. I'll be also on topics of. I'll also be talking about Star Wars and other certain topics as well. So yeah, look forward to that on my channel.
So yeah, so check out the State of Star Wars YouTube channel, as well as we have a couple of videos out for in lead up for Mandalorian season 2, focused on Boba Fett stories. I did a bunch with General CJG, and so we have a bunch of videos. So we recommend you check that out. But also, I have a YouTube channel as well, Django Fett. So if you want to follow me, feel free to do so.
Okay, links to all of our channels in the down below. And if you, the audience, have any suggestions of what you would like to hear us talk about, please feel free to mention it down in the comments section below. With all that said, I'm your host, Captain Henson.
This is CJ Raw signing off.
And Django Fett, signing off.
See you all next time. Captain Henson, signing off.